Hello, my name is Dan McFall, Vice President of Mobility Solutions for Mobile Labs. Thank you for joining our webinar today called Less Risk, More Reward, a Product Manager's Guide to Ensuring Quality Mobile Applications. Joining me today is Lee Barnes, founder and CTO of Utopia Solutions, and our presentation is really going to help you uncover some of the challenges, the concerns, and the risks that exist around developing and releasing quality mobile applications. Thanks for joining me, Lee. So I think what we're going to learn and think about today is the challenge as a product manager relative to, first and foremost, all of these different computing platforms or mobile devices that I have to think about, and then really how that directly relates to quality challenges. And traditional software quality, we could talk about bugs and all of those types of things, but let's think about how that carries down into user experience, which really means low ratings in the App Store, unhappy users, which are therefore unhappy customers. And let's try to keep this at a bigger picture today and talk about those risks and rewards.
So what we're going to talk about today are really unique mobile testing challenges that product managers face, and most importantly, strategies for meeting those challenges. And taking a little deeper dive, how can we mitigate those risks with test automation? And finally, Dan's going to discuss how mobile labs solve some of these problems, especially about accessing and managing your mobile devices. One of the major challenges we have is the scope of mobile testing, right? Everyone's seen the slides and the graphics about the sheer overwhelming number of configurations. And we're going to look at how we can reduce that down to something that is much more manageable, but still mitigates the risk appropriately for your mobile product. Another key differentiation for mobile is the mobile-specific test cases, right? We still have software, we're still addressing software quality the same way we have, but now we have another set of conditions that we have to deal with just because we're on a mobile device. And we really bake those down to five main categories. Network conditions, so the quality of your network condition, the type of your network condition certainly has an impact on your user's experience. Something as basic as installation, right? Your users are constantly installing, upgrading, uninstalling, reinstalling, and that's something you have to consider. Interrupt testing, right? Can't forget the fact that we're on a mobile device. We're going to get phone calls, we're going to get reminders, we're going to get text messages. Those things have to be taken into account. The device integration. So you have an application running on a mobile device, we have a lot of interesting things that are part of that device that we can bake into our apps, such as GPS, accelerometer, camera still, and video. Those are conditions that we need to take a look at. And finally, we have performance, not so much the performance of the back end itself, but the performance of the application on the device. So memory usage, CPU, battery drain, those are all important because we don't have unlimited resources on the device as we do essentially on the desktop. As a product manager, as we discussed, there are hundreds and thousands of potential combinations of test configurations that you may have to test against. You need to get down to something that is realistic within your organizational constraints, but also mitigates the risk. And the process we use to do that really is a filtering process. First, we need to understand what's the functionality and the technology of the application. What are the deployment platforms? What versions are you supporting? Those are really the basic ones. And then further, how does your application integrate with the device? What device features do you use? And that will help you understand what types of test conditions and test configurations are important. Finally, what systems is your application integrated with on the back end? Is it a standalone mobile app, or is it part of a larger enterprise system? Next, we need to look at the users and really what are the prevalent devices and mobile platforms in use. Certainly there are general statistics available, but it really makes sense to look at your user base and see if there are some important metrics there. And then finally, what are the business objectives of the app? What's the value of the application to the business? And conversely, what's the risk of application failure? And that's really going to help you understand how deep you need to go into that pool of potential configurations. Very similarly, once we've established the potential set of test configurations, we need to look at what mobile-specific test cases are important to us. Again, the functionality of your application, we approach that the same way we do any other app, but this set of test cases that are available to us just because we're on a mobile device, we need to take a look at and understand what's important. Again, we use a filtering process. We first look at what type of application it is. Is it a business app? Is it consumer-facing? Is it an internal enterprise app? And then we look at how that application is used. Is network going to be important or more important because it's a field app versus something that's regularly used in an area where network conditions are better? Finally, then we look at how that application integrates with a device, and this really is where you kind of get your broad brush on what potential test conditions there might be. Does the application involve taking still pictures or video? Is it location-based? Does it take accelerometer input or other types of input that are important just because you're on a mobile device? So as you go through that process and filter down to the test conditions, you'll eventually end up with a test case matrix of the configurations you're going to test against and the mobile-specific conditions that you're going to test across those configurations. So one strategy for addressing whatever set of test configurations you've come up with to address your risk is test automation. And certainly with mobile, with multiple platforms and multiple devices within that platform, the potential benefit of automation is huge. But there are some realities associated with that automation that we want to be careful about. But the ultimate goal of test automation as mobile, right, is to take a single set of your test cases, both functional, mobile specific, and run them across multiple platforms and devices.
I think, Lee, when we think about mobile being not standalone, when we look at the types of organizations that Utopia and Mobile Labs deal with, major enterprises, how I always like to put that in a context is they're doing mobile for their business, not mobile as their business. They're not really trying to drive downloads at $1.99 or 99 cents or whatever else for that. They're seeking to either engage their customers or enable their employees. And that puts mobile into a larger context for both application development and lifecycle management, but it also increases the risk because it may be great that I can, initiate a mobile check deposit or a mobile payment, but if it doesn't make it all the way back into the back of the system, then it doesn't really matter. So we have to think about these things in a larger context, and that's why we see so much demand for automation in the mobile space.
Great point, Dan. And in addition to that, automation provides the benefit of shortening the test cycle. And in mobile, it's extremely important. If you find an issue, you've got a minimum 7 to 10 days before you can get back into the App Store anyway. And to not minimize your testing time even increases that. But before we get too excited about test automation, we need to understand that there are some mobile-specific challenges, in addition to all the other challenges that we have come to learn about automation, that we really need to be aware of. And in this particular example, here's just a simple click of a button. And we've got an application here that manages stock portfolios. And you can see it's same app, iOS and Android, but it's a save button on one, it's a done button on the other. And depending on your tool capabilities, that can be a very complex solution or it can be a very simple solution. So you really need to understand both the differences that your app has across platforms, even across device form factors, and then also what are your tool capabilities specific to handling those challenges. And you need to understand that before you get started because that would certainly drive your overall solution. Probably one of the most important things I can tell you from automation in general, but specifically for mobile because of the shortened development cycles, is that you need to make automation part of the way you develop and test software. It can't be something you do at the end of the cycle. It's got to be woven in. You've got to proactively maintain your automation solution to deal with the application changes that are coming down the pipe, and it's got to be something that is just part of the fabric of how you develop those apps. So finally, from a mobile testing perspective, it's really not all that different. So yes, we talked about some mobile-specific challenges related to your potential test configurations and your potential test conditions and how we might approach automation, but it's not all that different. So we're not trying to boil the ocean here. It's what you've learned about developing quality software and making sure that software performs. Most of that still applies. In fact, all of it still applies. We've just got some additional mobile-specific things to take into consideration.
It's really interesting to think about, the challenges that we see in developing mobile applications, releasing them that we just talked about. And I always say that part of what makes business so fascinating is that we solve one challenge just to find the three that we didn't know we had behind it. And one of the things that Mobile Labs experiences, and what I'm here specifically to discuss, is once we cover the strategies around how do I develop a mobile application and the strategy around how do I test it, you're going to quickly find that relative to this new computing platform that you're trying to deal with, these mobile devices, you're going to have an access problem, which is going to then lead to a coverage problem. And we call that access problem the device challenge. It's very much specific to how do I access this repository and library of real mobile devices that I need to be able to perform my job every single day. Whether it's my job as a developer, my job as a tester, my job as a business analyst or a product manager, you're going to find that getting access to all of these real mobile devices is very, very challenging and is going to become yet another impediment to getting that 5-star rating that you want. Typically, the very first question when we start talking about the device challenge that we see is, well, why do I need real devices in the first place? Apple gives me emulators, Android gives me emulators. Why can't I just use those so that I'm testing against these types of environments in the same way that I did when I was emulating and simulating mainframes or desktop environments? But Lee covered some of this already. Some of the challenge is that your desktop emulator doesn't have a real battery in it. It doesn't have a GPS function in it that you might need. It doesn't have accelerometer functions that you're actually going to integrate. And one of the biggest ones, if we go all the way back to those 5 areas to think about, is because of the variance in the configuration of these devices, especially older devices or lower end devices, there are tremendous differences in application performance across variant, processor and graphic processor capabilities on these devices, which can have very real impacts on how your application is received if you're going to deploy an application into an emerging market with lower end devices and you've written the application in anticipation of high end devices. That's just another chance to introduce customer dissatisfaction. So you're going to have these repository of devices relative to the context of your application. And one of the things that I always like to say, because I realize I'm sitting here as a vendor, is that when I tell these types of stories and I say these things, it just becomes a claim. But when I can have a customer come out and make a statement about it, then it becomes a fact. So if you look at the Vice President of Quality Assurance from a major Southeastern bank, they are national. They looked at their biggest challenge once they really had multiple releases of their mobile banking application across a variety of platforms was maintaining the coverage of all of the mobile devices themselves that they needed, not just different versions of phones on different operating systems, but also different form factors, phones and tablets, multiple versions of Android devices from multiple equipment manufacturers, all of those types of challenge, and then figuring out, well, how do I control that? How do I keep power cables and devices themselves from wandering off? How do I add them as infrastructure back into all of my development processes so that I am keeping those efficiencies that I want to gain out of automation? And how do I make it available to a distributed team of resources throughout the globe who are going to require 24/7 access? What most people start with, and this is an example from a customer who I think did actually a great job, is this is one of the best organized mobile labs I've ever seen. And as a guy who actually came out of the world of lean manufacturing and Six Sigma, I love the fact that there's color coding on them and things have been labeled and there's immediate information. But you can also see some challenges already starting to present themselves. One, that label is only as good as the person remembering to update it. If the operating system version on the device is different, it's not like the label is ultimately updated. And you can already see, and it's amazing what a challenge this is for organizations, that several of the power cables and charging cables for these devices are already gone. So now you don't know if the device is at full battery, is it available, how do I access it, how do I control who actually has the device, who's using it, how long did they use it, how do I do reporting on all of those types of things. So while this is somewhat organized, it's still very chaotic. And when we think about chaos in business, that really leads to an even scarier word, which is inefficiency. And that's where money is flying out the door. So from the perspective of mobile labs, what we say is that you have to have a cloud of mobile devices. It needs to be able to cover all the sufficient device types that you have. So that's going to help you save money on buying devices and shipping them all over the world. And it's also going to keep those devices from being idle. But that lower idle time actually really leads to better coverage and more tester efficiency. Because now that it's infrastructure again and you're accessing it in a virtualized fashion, you're able to do it more quickly, you're able to do it more efficiently, and you're going to be able to manage that. And that's going to eliminate wait time. So things are going to become instantly available. You're going to be able to treat these as a virtual asset that you can schedule and manage within your system. It's going to make it easier for you to do follow-the-sun testing and re-enable outsourced and offshored strategies. And you're going to be able to collaborate again. One of the hardest things about mobile is we're back to almost a mini mainframe. It sits in one spot. It's not easy to look at. How do people come together, view the same screen and say, okay, I need multiple people thinking about this problem, and how do I re-engage development and test engineers working together? All of these things are opportunities to reintroduce efficiencies and economies of scale back into your mobile development efforts, and once again, release high-quality applications faster and on budget. And then when you think about that, and we go back to why we need to automate and why we have to have access to all of these different devices and why we have to think about the demands that we're dealing with, it's because every technology revolution we really experience builds off of the previous one. So we had a mainframe that really introduces computing to everyone, and we start testing for that. And then we found out though that mainframes are very expensive and they're an enterprise-only type solution, and the personal computer comes into play, and that really gives rise to people building client-server architectures. But what's so interesting about that is it's always a build. So those client-server applications actually go back to mainframe data, and it actually increased the amount of testing that we had to do and the amount of coverage that we needed. Then the web comes out and actually builds on top of those client-server capabilities, and there were tremendous companies built out of just webifying mainframe applications and client-server applications, and driving to more and more consumerized IT functions. And mobile and the bring your own device revolution has really driven that even further. But if we think about some of the folks in the industry, if you think about consumer product companies, retailers, people like that, they're actually still extending all the way back from mainframe out to mobile applications. So what has that done? That's made for complex applications in a complex market, yet because of the consumerization of IT, our time to market is expected to be even shorter to release even more high quality, functional applications, but they have to be amazingly simple. So this world has become more and more and more complex, and it requires a wider a range of competencies, but we have to carry it all the way back to our back-end systems. And to go all the way back to that, then that's why we talk about that nothing's really mobile only for the enterprise. You really have a wide variety of demands, and you have to have a strategy that extends all the way back to your back end. So to transition a little bit then into how Mobile Labs specifically helps you do this, we believe that you have to be able to quickly and easily set up a secured environment in which you are able to get access to the mobile devices that you need to manage the mobile applications and the variety of mobile applications that you're going to test on those devices. And if I'm going to ask an organization to bring this on-premise for security reasons, then it has to be very, very simple for you to be able to do it. So everything has to be plug and play. You need to be able to bring your mobile cloud on-premise, plug it into a standard power outlet, into a local area network connection cable, and then plug the devices in just using their standard USB port. So you need something that you could set up in 30 minutes to an hour, have another hour of training, and now you have your mobile cloud. Once your cloud environment is set up physically, it's going to provide access in a wide variety of fashions for a wide variety of users. So it's going to enable that collaboration that we talked about in your manual test organization to get access to devices. As IT professionals, it's going to give us our favorite word, which is management, which also means control, and we're going to be able to see what's going on and manage that. We're going to enable automated testing strategies against a managed series of devices, and we're also going to bring to bear some tools and processes that your development organization is going to care about so that you can move your testing practices further to the left so that we follow that automation life cycle that Lee talked about in a continuous environment.
Thanks, Dan. And to wrap up, I just wanted to summarize really what we talked about, which is, first of all, you've got challenges specific to mobile. And while everything is the same in terms of how you develop quality and high-performing software, there's some mobile-specific things that you need to think about. And as Dan mentioned, Mobile Labs offers solutions to address these very important mobile challenges that you as a product manager are going to face. And Utopia Solutions helps you understand how to approach this from a strategy perspective, how to integrate a mobile quality strategy into your overall mobile and business strategy. That's all we have for today. Thanks, Dan, again for having me. And this was a little different. So after you guys watch this webinar, you're going to have the opportunity to register for live Q&A sessions. And accompanying the video, you'll see the link on how to do that. So we look forward to having all your insightful questions, and Dan and I will be there to help you out.